The regular. I'm a 17-year-old girl with an after-school job as a barista at a well-known coffee chain. My afternoons are filled with the comforting sounds of grinding beans and the hiss of the espresso machine. I loved my job. My coworkers were great, my boss was really nice, and there were plenty of friendly regulars. I certainly never felt unsafe there. Until Alex. I'd been working there for a few months when I served Alex for the first time. Regular coffee, light and sweet. He quickly became a regular. He was in his 30s and not bad looking, but there was just something about him that didn't seem quite right. As the days turned into weeks, it seemed like he was coming to see me more than to buy a cup of coffee. His friendliness took on a strange intensity. He'd linger at the counter, asking me about my day, sharing bits about his life that felt too personal for someone I barely knew. All the while, I was busy trying to get others' orders prepared. He would fixate on me during our conversations, his gaze lingering just a second too long. If he ever did leave the counter for a seat, he'd always pick the table closest to me. More than once I looked up to see him staring. It started to feel suffocating, and the day I'd been dreading finally arrived. "What are you doing after work?" he asked, flashing me a smile. "Just going home," I said, not looking up at him. "Why don't you let me take you out for a drink?" he said, leaning against the counter. "I know a great cigar bar in the city." I'm only 17, I said. He waved off my objection. "I know the owner," he said with a cocky smile. "It's no problem." I really can't," I said. "I have loads of homework and school in the morning." The warmth in his eyes flickered and vanished, replaced by something darker. He took a slow sip of his coffee, the silence stretching uncomfortably between us before he left, his gaze burning into my back as I wiped down the counter. The next week was a roller coaster. He returned every day as usual, but his demeanor shifted from cold to friendly, almost like a light switch being flipped. After a week passed, he tried again. He put his hand over mine as I handed him his coffee. "Have you changed your mind yet?" he asked, a hopeful tilt in his voice. "About what?" I asked, playing dumb and pulling my hand away. "About our date," he said. "Doesn't have to be a bar. I could take you out for dinner, anywhere you like." I shook my head, my stomach turning. "I'm sorry," I said. I'm not interested, but thank you for the offer." That's when he snapped. His face contorted, the friendly mask completely gone. "Is that right?" he growled in a whisper. "You think you're too good for me? You stupid little brat." Leaving his coffee on the counter, Alex stormed out. It had been so abrupt and so quiet, nobody even noticed. My heart racing, I ran to the bathroom to calm down before I could return to work. That night, I returned home still shaken. I couldn't escape the feeling that he was watching me. When the doorbell rang the next morning, though, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. A bouquet of flowers sitting on my doorstep. I opened the card, which read, "I'm sorry, love, A." My body went cold. How did he know where I lived? I'd never been so scared. When my mom asked who sent the flowers, I lied and said it was a boy in my school. I didn't dare tell my parents, although I couldn't tell you why. Instead, I just tried to avoid him at work, hiding in the back room whenever I saw him coming in, but that only bought me a few days. One evening, as I ended my shift, I was making my way to my car when he emerged from the shadows like a ghost. "You can't keep avoiding me," he said, his voice low and unsettling. I froze, unsure what to say. "You know, when someone sends you flowers, the polite thing to do is say thank you." He grabbed my arm and started pulling me away from my car and toward his. "Maybe we should work on your manners." Just then, my boss, Sarah, emerged from the shop. "Hey, you get away from her," Sarah yelled, rushing toward us. Alex hesitated, then let go of my arm. "I'll be back," he said, giving me an icy glare. "No, you won't," Sarah snapped. Alex smiled at her. Not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that makes you think of serial killers. Without another word, he left. Sarah helped calm me down so I could drive home. I watched my rear view the entire way, expecting to see headlights fast approaching. But he didn't follow. I made it home safely. I thought of telling my parents then, but I hesitated. I felt so stupid and blamed myself. Being inside with my mom and dad made me feel secure. But that wouldn't last. That night, I woke to the sound of my dog, Harley, barking furiously. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. 3 a.m. I crept down the hallway, peeking out the window to see a shadowy figure near our porch. It was Alex, trying to get in. I felt a hand on my shoulder and screamed, but it was my dad. "I know him," I said, tears in my eyes. My dad did a double take. He's been stalking me. I saw something in my dad's eyes that I'd never seen before. "Go to your mom and call the police," he said. "Now." I did as I was told, closing my parents' bedroom door behind me. I was starting to fill my mom in when we heard loud pounding on the door. My mom quickly called the police like my dad had said. The pounding was then joined by shouting, then a crash. I collapsed, sobbing in my mom's arms, telling her I was sorry over and over again. We didn't come out until the police arrived. By then, my dad had Alex pinned to the floor. Alex's nose and mouth were bleeding. The police led him away, and I was overcome with relief. But I know it's not over. Alex isn't going to face any serious jail time. We got a restraining order in place, but I still find myself looking over my shoulder whenever I step outside. I see him in every shadow and around every corner. The world feels like a different place, and I'm not sure if I'll ever feel safe again. Closing time. It was a chilly night at the coffee shop where I've worked for the past few years. I worked my way up to a manager position, and I was closing the shop up alone. That's not the norm, but I had just sent my coworker home early because she wasn't feeling well. With not much left to do, I figured I could handle the cleanup alone. I made my rounds, wiping down counters, stacking the chairs, and cleaning the last of the coffee pots. When I got to the bathrooms, I cleaned the first one without a hitch. The second one, however, was locked. That was odd. The door is supposed to automatically unlock when opened from the inside. I knocked lightly, calling out, "Hey, is anyone in there? We're closed." Silence followed, and I frowned. Maybe someone accidentally locked the door. I shrugged it off and headed to the back to grab the key. When I returned, the bathroom door was ajar. My heart dropped. I pushed it open, calling out again, but there was no answer and no one inside. The air felt heavy and still, as if the shop itself was holding its breath. I stepped back into the hallway, unease creeping up my spine. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows near the front of the shop. A man in a dark hoodie stepped into my path, his face obscured. Our eyes locked. I swallowed hard. "You're gonna open the register for me," he said, his voice low and threatening. I sized him up. He was bigger than me, but not by much. My mind raced. I couldn't see his hands, and that worried me. What if he had a weapon? I raised my hands, trying to appear non-threatening. "Okay, man," I said. "No problem." As I slowly moved closer, he pulled his hands from his pockets. His fists were clenched, but his hands were empty. If I had thought about it, I'm not sure I would have acted. Instead, moving on impulse and adrenaline, I quickly closed the distance and threw a punch. It connected, catching him off guard. He staggered, but recovered quickly, grabbing a hold of me. Up close, the smell of alcohol hit me. He was likely drunk. Maybe that's what led to his decision to rob the coffee shop. I tried to throw another punch, but he wrapped his arms around me, and we crashed to the ground, grappling. Panic surged through me. I couldn't let him overpower me. I managed to wriggle free, scrambling to my feet. As he started to get up, I threw a kick aimed at his head, but missed, only managing to clip his shoulder. It was enough for him to lose his balance and fall back to the floor. With my heart pounding, I bolted for the door. He shouted something, but I didn't stop to listen. I sprinted through the parking lot, adrenaline propelling me forward. Across the street, the supermarket glowed like a beacon. I glanced back, and to my relief, the guy was nowhere to be seen. Inside the store, I found the nearest phone and called the police, my hand shaking. After a while, they arrived, taking my statement and walking back over to the shop with me. The owner met us there. The guy had made a bit of a mess, but it didn't look like he managed to steal anything. When we reviewed the security footage, we found that the man had entered the shop about 30 minutes before closing, heading straight for the bathroom. He'd been waiting for me to close up, hidden away. The cameras hadn't caught a clear shot of his face. His hood was pulled tight the whole time. The cops left, assuring us they'd keep an eye on the area, but I felt like an idiot. I should have checked the bathroom and ensured the shop was empty before locking up. Now, every time I close the shop, I check the bathrooms and back rooms with at least 2 people on staff, just to be safe. But even with others around, I'm haunted by the feeling that I'll find him lurking in the shadows again, waiting for another chance. The coffee shop, once a cozy haven, has turned into a place of anxiety, and I can't shake the fear that one day my instincts might not be enough. The brew that burned. I manage a small coffee shop near a bustling college campus. It's a cozy place, filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Most of our customers are students, eager to study or catch up with friends. But there's one regular who stands out for all the wrong reasons. We'll call her Karen. Karen is the epitome of a Karen. She always finds something to complain about, whether it's her drink being too hot or too cold, or the price going up for her usual latte, which hasn't changed, mind you. But what really gets under my skin is her disdain for the college kids who come here to study. She believes they're all beneath her and should let her cut in line and vacate tables immediately if she wants to sit down. One afternoon, as I was showing a trainee the ropes, Karen and a friend stormed in, their faces already set with irritation. I took their orders because I didn't want them to unload their attitudes on the poor trainee. As usual, Karen complained about anything she could think of, from the price to the wait time. Once they had their cups in hand, they turned their attention to the tables and spotted a college guy in the corner, headphones on, deeply focused on his textbooks with papers spread out before him. Karen marched over to him with her friend in tow. "Excuse me," she snapped, making everyone in the shop jump. "You need to get up. We want that table." With his head down and headphones in, the guy didn't even hear her. What I saw next, I couldn't believe, even for her. She reached across the table and slammed the book he was reading shut. Shocked, he pulled off his headphones. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" he asked. "We want to sit there," she snapped again. "You're in the way. Now move." I was already on my way over there. It's one thing for her to give me attitude, but acting like that to another customer was insane. "Ma'am," I said, "our tables are first come, first serve. He was here before you." Her face flushed with rage. "He isn't even a real customer. He's hogging the table." I pointed to the cup of coffee on the table in front of him. "He's as much a customer as you are, and he has every right to be here." She unleashed a tirade of complaints about everything under the sun. Our prices, our atmosphere, the kids. I finally had it. "Clearly, you don't like it here. You always find something to complain about. Well, we don't like you either. So get out and don't come back. You're banned." I wasn't sure I actually had the authority to do that, but since this was a small privately owned shop and not some national chain, I was pretty confident the owner would back me up. Everyone in the shop turned to look. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief, and her friend looked at me, clearly torn between wanting to support Karen and her obvious embarrassment at the situation. Karen was beet red and started stammering. "If you don't leave right now, I'll call the cops and have you trespassed," I said before she could get going again. Her friend grabbed her arm and pulled her towards the door, Karen shouting threats and curses as she stormed out. For a brief moment, I felt victorious. I hoped I'd finally rid my shop of her. No such luck. A few days passed without a Karen sighting, and I foolishly thought the worst was over. It was a quiet evening, the kind where I could finally breathe after a hectic week. As we prepared to close, an acrid smell suddenly wafted through the shop. My heart raced as I realized. Smoke. The back office was on fire. I sprinted to the back and found my coworker trapped in the storage room, coughing and disoriented on the other side of the flames. I covered my face and ran through the black smoke of the office, yanking the door open and helping her stumble out as chaos erupted. We escaped just in time as flames began to lick the walls. The fire department arrived quickly and put out the fire. They also investigated the cause. It turned out that someone had thrown a makeshift Molotov cocktail through our window. The shop obviously had to be shut down, and we forwarded the security footage to the police. A couple days later, they called to let us know they had a suspect. Karen. She had been so furious about not getting her precious table that she attempted to burn down our coffee shop with people inside. I couldn't fathom the depths of her rage. After she was arrested, I expected some form of remorse, a hint of apology. But even in handcuffs, Karen didn't show an ounce of accountability. She was still ranting, still insisting that we had wronged her. The coffee shop was repaired, and eventually we had a grand reopening. We all did our best to move on, but the scars of that night remain. The coffee shop, once a safe haven for students and friends, now felt tainted by the memory of a woman who let her anger consume her completely. Every time I see a college student studying at one of our tables, I think of her. The fear she instilled in me lingers, a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are not the ones lurking in the shadows, but those walking among us, fueled by anger, entitlement, and a thirst for vengeance. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed these true coffee shop horror stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time with more Whispers from the Pines.